Hi SLP, it's Alexandra. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. I'm really excited to introduce you all to Courtney and Gabby with the YWCA. They are here to talk to you all about healthy relationships. This is an important topic and it relates a lot to Wonder because Augie definitely learns how to set healthy boundaries with his family and with his new friends in school. So let's all welcome Gabby and Courtney. Hi, SLP, it's Alexandra, and today we have our guests, Gabby and Courtney. Hi.
Hi, SLP.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Gabby is a familiar face, so SLP participants and families, you may recognize Gabby. She's come and talked to us about healthy relationships before, but we have a new face that we're super excited to meet and see more of. Courtney's joining as well, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you two and let you start your presentation. I'll see you at the end. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Alexandra. And hello again, SLP. We're excited to be here. We have a presentation today, but first we'll introduce ourselves. So, like Alexandra said, I've been with you all before, but my name's Gabby, and I'm with the YWCA Carlisle. And this is Courtney.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm here helping Gabby. I'm a coworker of hers. I'm going to be participating in your events more often now.
Yeah, so you'll be seeing a lot more of Courtney. And just for anyone that doesn't know, the YWCA Carlisle, we have all kinds of different programs. We have summer camps, we have different programs, we do counseling, and then the main thing that Courtney and I do is we work with young people about safety and keeping their body safe, and then also around healthy relationships and how we can be in healthy relationships and what healthy relationships are about. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so we decided we wanted to talk to you all about boundaries. So a lot of times when we go into schools and we talk to young people, we talk about ways to keep ourselves safe and the people around us safe. And so something that is really important in keeping us and everyone around us safe is boundaries. So that's what we wanted to talk about today. So first, let's just talk about what is a boundary. So what do you all think? What's a boundary? We're sure that you're answering at home, but we're going to obviously just talk about what a boundary is. So a boundary can be a lot of things, but it's really a line that you don't cross, right? So what's some boundaries around us in everyday life? What would you say, Courtney?
To me, a boundary is my room. I don't want people to come in there, especially without knocking or without me telling them they're allowed to.
Yeah, exactly. So our room is a boundary. Our homes can be a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
We have boundaries in schools, right? We have our classrooms. We have our grades. Yeah. So those are some boundaries. There's also some boundaries that we have in our homes. Maybe what time we go to bed is a boundary. Also, when we're driving around, how fast we're able to go on the roads can be a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of boundaries all around us. Right now, wearing a mask in some stores is a boundary to keep people safe. So those are boundaries. And then specifically, Courtney and I want to talk about personal boundaries. So just like all the other boundaries we were talking about, personal boundaries are for our own self. So it's really about what keeps us safe. So what are the rules that you have for your body that you want other people to follow around you, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of different personal boundaries. And so the personal boundary is how you feel what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. And yeah, so we'll talk more about those. So first, we wanted to talk about physical boundaries. So a physical boundary is how close or far you want someone to be away or close to you, or it can be what's okay to be done around your body. So I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of like our body bubbles or our body space. That's a term Courtney and I hear a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, and so your bubble is your personal space, right? That's your personal body boundary, right? And some things that what are some things that are physical boundaries? What are some physical boundaries we can think of examples of? Hugging has to have permission. It has to be okay with your physical boundary, right?
Yep. High-fiving.
Yep, high-fiving or handshakes or how close or far you're sitting next to someone, right? So those can all be within our physical boundaries. And so it's really important before we are, going up to someone or touching someone that we're remembering, hey, they have a physical boundary and I need to make sure that I'm getting permission to enter their physical boundaries. So before you go up and touch someone, you need to ask, hey, is this okay? Just like someone needs to ask you before they come up and touch you, right? Because that's our physical boundary. So we have to say if it's okay and if it's not okay. And some days it's just not okay. Sometimes you're just not in the mood for anything, for a handshake, for a hug, for someone being really close to you. Right now, with what's happening with COVID, we have to be extra careful with physical boundaries and make sure that we are giving a safe distance between the people around us to keep them safe. So there's a lot of physical boundaries that we're dealing with right now. Yeah. Anything else on physical boundaries?
Well, Gabby, one I can think of is tickling.
Ooh,
that happens a lot in families, and it's just really important that even when you're with families and siblings that you still ask if you are tickling someone, or you can tell someone to stop if you don't like it too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of times when Courtney and I go into schools, we read a book about a little boy who is being tickled by his uncle, and he really doesn't like it. And in the story, he has a really hard time getting his uncle to stop tickling him, and he has to ask his mom for help with that. And that's a really good example of someone not following or respecting your physical boundary if they're tickling you after you have said no or when you don't want tickled. So that's a really good example. Yeah. What are some of your physical boundaries? What are things that you're okay with and you're not okay with? And sometimes that can change with who it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we have different physical boundaries with different people. So for me, if my mom wants to give me a hug, usually I'm okay with that a lot of times. But if someone I don't know very well wants to give me a hug, that doesn't feel comfortable to me. And so that's something that I'm not comfortable with. So it can be different. You can have different physical boundaries with the different people in your life. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's look at our next boundary example. So emotional boundaries. So we wanted to talk about emotional boundaries. So the physical boundaries is what is our physical body. So it's the things happening around us or to our bodies. But the emotional boundaries, those are the things that affect us in our minds and our insides and how we feel and our feelings. So some examples of things that can affect our emotional boundaries could be people talking about you or saying mean things about you, or maybe sharing secrets. If you've told a friend a secret and then your friend tells someone else without your permission, that could be hurting your emotional boundary. It could be someone talking about things that make you feel uncomfortable around you, or maybe someone yelling at you, or you yelling at someone else could be hurting their emotional boundaries. Any other thoughts on emotional boundaries, examples?
One that comes to my mind is when like friends or family come up to me and they're talking not so nicely about other people, and that makes me not feel good, and I don't like to hear that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an emotional boundary for me.
Yeah, so people not talking about other people around you. That's a really good example. Yeah, so if you have friends and then another friend starts talking about your friend when they're not around, that can feel uncomfortable. And so that could be a boundary for you where you're like, hey, I don't like people talking about my friends. And that's an emotional boundary, right? Yeah, definitely. Emotional boundaries could be how someone talks to you. So I'm not okay with people calling me mean names. That's just not okay. And I'm not okay with the people around me calling the people around me mean names. So that's an emotional boundary for me, is that people aren't calling people names around me. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah. What are some of your emotional boundaries, SLP? Okay. And so we have digital boundaries. And so digital boundaries are those boundaries that we have on our online spaces or our online or technology tools. So like our phones and our computers and things like that. So the digital boundaries are a lot of those boundaries, but they're online. So it can be all kinds of things, like maybe you have digital boundaries that you made with your parents where you're allowed or you're not allowed on certain websites, or you're only allowed online for so many hours, or maybe who you're allowed to talk to. So a digital boundary I know that I have in my family is that we're not allowed to talk to people online that we don't know, or have add friends on social media that we don't know. So we can only allow or approve friends for people that we know in real life. So that would be an example of a digital boundary. Sometimes in relationships, people like to share passwords or look at each other's phones. So those are all examples of digital boundaries. Are you okay with someone looking at your phone? Maybe if your friend needs to use your phone, what are you okay with your friend looking at your phone, or are you okay with them looking at your email? So those types of things can be examples of digital boundaries. And right now we have to do a lot of things online. So we might even not even know we might be doing more things that we're not used to doing online. So we have to think, what is the safest, what are boundaries that are going to keep me safe online? And so some, like with Zoom, you have to use a password to go to meetings. So things like that help make things safer. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we can do online to set boundaries for ourselves. And sometimes that's just saying, I'm not gonna go on this website today because it takes a lot of my time up.
Definitely.
Yeah. And digital boundaries are a good thing to talk to your families about too, because there's a lot of different apps and things, and some apps that we use have tracking maps and stuff online. So we have to really make sure that we know what kind of online apps and social media devices we're using, because sometimes we don't even realize that they are that they have a lot more of our information than we know. So it's important that we are understanding what we're okay with and what we're not okay with online. Yeah. Okay. So those were the three boundary examples that I wanted to go over. Um, those are a lot of times what we talk to young people about. Are there any things that I'm missing as far as boundaries that you're thinking, Courtney?
Not right now.
Not right
No,
now.
I think we covered most of what we usually talk about.
Yep. We usually really talk about all of those examples, and a lot of times then we have examples that we talk with people in our classes about. So I'm just going to read an example here that we usually use with our class, and then I'll have Courtney, we'll work through it with you all, just so you can think about these boundaries in a real life situation. All right, so I'm going to do this one. So Amanda is on vacation with her family. A cousin she has never met before comes up to Amanda and tells her she has pretty hair and begins to play with Amanda's hair. Amanda is feeling confused and unsure of what to say, so she walks over to the picnic table where the rest of her family is. So, was a boundary crossed in this scenario?
Well, Gabby, I think there was, because Amanda's cousin, she's never met her before, and she comes over and starts touching her hair. And that, to me, means that a physical boundary was crossed, especially when Amanda says she's feeling confused and unsure of what to do. That means she's probably feeling a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. So I agree, Courtney. I think that this cousin came up to Amanda and started touching her hair, and that was crossing her physical boundaries. So it clearly made her feel uncomfortable. And Amanda wasn't even really sure too much about who this cousin is. So maybe if it was someone she felt more comfortable, she would have felt more comfortable with that. But in this scenario, she was clearly uncomfortable, and her physical boundary of her hair being played with was crossed. And so that's a boundary. So someone coming up and playing with our hair without asking our permission is crossing a physical boundary, right? Has that ever happened to you? It can feel really uncomfortable. All right, let's do one more. So Ben and Stacy are working on an art project for a class. Ben needs colored pencils and reaches over to Stacy's pencil box and takes her new pack of colored pencils. Stacy feels shocked and angry. She turns around and tells Ben, "Those are my colored pencils. Please give them back." So what do we think about this scenario? Was a boundary crossed?
Yeah, Miss Gabby, we always talk about this one when we go into our classrooms. We all have bubbles, and in our bubbles includes our desks and our pencil box and our items. So when he reached over and took the pencils without asking, that was crossing a boundary. And Stacy was obviously kind of angry and upset about that happening.
Yeah, for sure. And so like Ms. Courtney said with the desk, so even though Ben didn't touch Stacy, he touched Stacy's things, right? So it doesn't always have to be our bodies. It can also be our things and the things that are ours. So you still have to ask permission before you're touching other people's things, right? Yeah, exactly. So great. So those are two scenarios, just to kind of make you think about boundaries. They're not always our bodies. Sometimes there are things as well. But in both of those scenarios, it's important that we understand when someone does cross our boundaries, what do we do? How can we help ourselves if someone is not respecting our boundaries? And so whenever we go into schools, we like to talk about who are the trusted adults. So who are the trusted adults that we can go to when we don't feel like our boundaries are being respected? And the reason that Ms. Courtney and I like to ask who the trusted adults are is because adults can help us find the help that we need. And sometimes even it's important that we talk to our friends and our close friends and our siblings or even our pets can help us feel better. If we need some help with someone not respecting our boundaries, it's important that we get help that's going to make the make it stop, right? And so it's really important that we talk to a trusted adult, and if the thing keeps happening and the trusted adult doesn't help, then find another trusted adult to talk to, because our boundaries are really important. They keep us safe, and it's important that they're being respected because that's what keeps us safe. So if they're not being respected, then it's really important that we get help for that. So who are some trusted adults in your life, SLP, that you can talk to if you don't feel like your boundaries are being respected? Let's think about it. So we like to think about trusted adults in our homes, or trusted adults in the communities, and trusted adults in our schools or the spaces that we go into. So sometimes we get a lot of different lists of trusted adults. But yeah, so we would love to know, who are your trusted adults? Take a second to think about who could you feel comfortable asking for help if someone's not respecting your personal boundary? Who are some people that you could trust to talk to about your personal boundaries? Ms. Courtney.
For me, I would trust my mom and my dad. And, I'm an adult now, but when I was younger, I really looked up to my teachers and my guidance counselors at school. And I played a lot of sports. So I really liked like my soccer coach and track coach. They were really important adults in my life that I would trust to go to.
Nice. Yeah, I had also some trusted teachers that I could go to as well, and my mom as well. Like Miss Courtney said, I also got along with my aunt really well, so I think I could trust my aunt if I didn't feel comfortable talking to my teacher about someone not respecting my boundaries. Yeah, so I would say an aunt or a teacher or a parent for me. Yeah. Yeah, so think about that. Talk about it with your family. Who are the trusted adults that you feel safe asking for help for? Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's what we wanted to talk about as far as boundaries go. So boundaries are really important. Like we said, we could go through that. That was just a short list of kind of a short discussion about boundaries. We could talk about boundaries all day long because there's boundaries about everything, because boundaries are what keep us safe. They're what you're okay with, what you're not okay with. And we're all different. So Miss Courtney's boundaries are going to be different than my boundaries. So that's why it's really important that we ask our friends and the people around us what's okay and what's not okay before we just do it, because we want to respect their boundaries too. Hello.
Hi. I hope it's okay to join back. I hope this is a good time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I was just kind of thinking as you were sharing and taking some notes, and I wanted to share with SLP participants and families who my trusted adults are. And definitely like my parents, my sister and my brother-in-law, my nieces, but they're little. They're just cute. I think I'm their trusted adult. But yeah, the trusted adults in my life are definitely my family. I know when I'm having a bad day or a good day, like I can go to them and process and talk through those things. And for the longest time, a trusted adult in my life, and I know this might not be the situation for everybody, but my therapist was a trusted adult in my life. And because for me, I really needed a professional. I needed somebody with like education and background and talking about boundaries and stuff. So for me, my therapist was somebody I could go to. That was a really healthy and important relationship for me. And as Miss Gabby knows, we both just finished our degrees. And so I have a lot of professors at Shippensburg University that I trusted and knew that I could go to with boundaries, personal boundaries, but also like boundaries related to school. Like there were a lot of trusted teachers that I could go to as well. And I just wanted to say to everybody watching, Joey and I, my assistant Joey, who is actually delivering activity boxes right now, we are both two trusted adults that are here for all of our SLP participants and families. And we're always here to process and just support you all no matter what. Some notes that I took while you were all presenting. I'm so happy you talked about electronic boundaries, not just because we're in a Zoom world, and that's going to become more of our normal, but like technology's been around for as long as I can remember. And so like I remember for my age and my generation, I remember like social media was a big thing. Like MySpace was happening. Everybody's probably like, what is she talking about? That's an old one. But I remember that being like really cool and sitting down and talking to my parents about like, okay, well, if you want to have it, like what is that gonna look like? And, as I've gotten older, and maybe some SLP participants will realize this as they go on, like Facebook's the only social media that I have now. And that was a boundary for me, like having other social media just like kept me distracted and like didn't allow me to get schoolwork done. And Miss Gabby knows, grad school is a lot of hard work. And I don't, Miss Courtney, are you in a grad program? Yeah. So, you do not have time for social media. And so for me, when I started grad school, a boundary I had to set for myself was like, okay, like I'm not going to have Instagram, I'm not going to have, other social media outlets. And it's what I love about boundaries is like everybody has different boundaries, and that's a beautiful thing. Um, and it's worth it to have those conversations with people because everybody's boundaries are different.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good point too, Alexandra, with the social media also. Like, my friend who doesn't have Facebook and I have Facebook, so it's important. So my friend has a boundary to not be on social media, right? But I have a boundary where I like being on social media and I like my Facebook and sharing Facebook pictures. But it's important that I ask my friend if it's okay if I share pictures where she's in the pictures on my social media because she's chosen not to be on social media, right? So that's a good point with we all have different boundaries around everything, but around social media specifically. So it's important that we're respecting each other's boundaries with our social medias too.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the cool things about like this virtual world, that we're all, diving into a little differently than before is, when we were preparing for SLP, we wanted to acknowledge that a lot of like what we do, we have a private Facebook group, and then we have like our public Facebook group. But we wanted to respect that some of our participants might not be on social media, and so we have like other ways to share our content, like with email and like just other like private source areas to put like resources so that it doesn't have to all just be on social media, because surprisingly some people don't have it. You're going to find some people that don't have it. And I liked a lot of the like the examples, like the case studies that you gave, like as I think the one little girl, I can't remember her name, her hair was being played with. Like that's a big boundary for me. Like I don't like when people touch my hair. And I used to have really, really short hair. It's called like a pixie haircut. And when it was like really short, everybody would be like, oh, and like they would try to touch it because it was so short. And it took a while, but just I think like SLP participants, if you know what this is, like role playing with a trusted adult, though, make sure it's somebody that you trust with. And maybe you two could talk about this a little bit more too, but it just kind of popped in my head, like find out what your boundaries are, and in a safe and like respectful way, like practice saying no, or I don't like that, and naming the thing that you don't like. Last week we had our SLP guest that joined us last week was Stacy, and she talked about health and wellness, and one of the things that she taught SLP participants was like how to say no. So I was curious like what you two had to say about that, and how that could be helpful for setting up healthy boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. So our boundaries, like we've been saying, they're to keep us safe. And so if someone's not respecting your boundary, like you said, Alexandra, naming that. So I don't know, like can you please not touch my hair? That made me feel uncomfortable. Or just when you touched my hair, I didn't feel comfortable. Or even just saying, hey, no.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like that. So it can be simple, because sometimes it can be hard to tell people, no, I don't like that. Sometimes it can feel scary. So just saying no, stop, and letting them know what, if you can. And then if they don't stop, finding a trusted adult to talk to about it, because it's not okay for someone to not respect your boundary. No matter what it is. But if you're able to tell them what boundaries being crossed, then that's really helpful, so that they know, because sometimes we don't know. Sometimes you accidentally do cross someone's boundary and you don't realize, because maybe you don't have that boundary or you weren't thinking about it. And so it's really helpful when the person says, hey, no, I don't like it when you touch my hair. so that person knows not to do it again. But the most important thing is to just say, no, hey, stop, and get a trusted adult if that person doesn't stop or if you still feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I hope everybody, for SLP participants and families, when you're watching, I hope you all take note. Like, I can hear the tone in your voice changing, Gabby, and I can like even see the like, maybe like a hand gesture is appropriate. You know, like this shows me like stop. Sometimes nonverbals, like I think our body language is really important to setting boundaries, because, you know, when you laugh it off and you smile and you say like, oh no, like somebody could take that differently than you being like, no. And so I was noting like how your tone changed and everything. And I think that's
And
really important.
on that, like maybe at the time you might, if someone's crossing your boundary, you might feel panicked, or maybe you're not sure how to confront it. So just that no, and getting away from that situation. And then maybe later you can talk about it with that person if you feel more comfortable to do so later. So maybe once you process, and then you're like, okay, hey, that made me really uncomfortable when you shared that picture of me on Facebook. Can you please not do that again? So like maybe it's easier to talk about it later, but for safety reasons, just saying no and getting away from that person if they're not respecting your boundary is the most important thing at the beginning.
Yeah, that is one thing that has taken me a long time to learn, but I'm very grateful that I've learned it, is that you can always revisit something.
Yes.
That's a huge, that word revisit, that's a big term that I've come to learn and grow to love and understand, that you can always revisit something. But like you both have taught us today, like the important thing is to just, remove yourself from that situation. And the last thing I was thinking as we were talking, and this is why I love this conversation, and I love that we're able to have this, is that like boundaries isn't just about, saying like what you don't like or what you don't want somebody to do. It's also like about being willing to listen and share what you want or what you need, and like, and it's like, it's that expression, it's like a two-way street, and you have to make sure that like everybody's safe and their emotions and their physical bubbles are being respected. And I think it's great when you can just sit down and realize like, hey, those are your boundaries, but these are mine as well, like, and it's really important to, understand that like, just because like, let's say I'm a hugger, like if my boundaries are like, oh yeah, I like to hug people, but I meet somebody that doesn't, like, I have to be okay with that, like I have to be like, all right, that's your boundary. Like, and that's something I've just been thinking about and processing as we've been talking, is like, it's one thing to be like, hey, I don't like that, but it's also one thing to be like, I do like this, but it's okay if if you don't want me to do that, I won't. And that was just a really interesting thought that just kind of came to mind. I was curious what your thoughts were.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, I mean, I just love the way that you put that, because yes, I mean, I'm a hugger too. And so, yeah, so it's when you're going up to someone and you're meaning it in a very kind way, like I want to hug because I care about you, being okay with the other person's answers, because it's okay, and also giving them space to say no. So you can't, I can't assume just because I like hugs that Miss Courtney likes hugs, right? So I would have to ask. And so the boundaries do go two ways, where we have to make sure that we're asking for permission before
Absolutely.
we're entering
Permission.
other people's
Yes,
boundaries.
that's the word. Yeah, it was like on the tip of my tongue. I was like, what am I trying to say? Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you both so much. Yeah, what were you going to say, Courtney?
I was gonna say, when we go into schools, especially with our younger kiddos, we actually do a skit where we have people say like, no, I don't want to hug. And we practice saying like, that's okay. And like the whole class will say like, that's okay, because it's okay to acknowledge, like if I ask Gabby for a hug and she says no, that might make me sad. But just because I'm sad doesn't mean I still go into her bubble without permission.
Yeah.
So that's, if you do role plays at home, that's something to work on too.
Yeah. Role playing is super healthy and super important. And so for our SLP participants, maybe some of you are older siblings in the home and you have some younger siblings, and don't forget that like you're also role modeling. And so, the relationships and the boundaries that you set up, and even for our parents that are listening and watching, these are all really good things to like start, practicing and working on at home, and, carrying out in school, and, the other places that we go, and just, remember that, we're always modeling our behavior for others. And like Augie teaches us and I don't know if you both are familiar with the book Wonder, but, boundaries are about kindness, and choosing kindness, and choosing to, respect and honor, understand what other people have to say, and what they like and what they don't like. And I think that all boils down to kindness, and definitely respect. Definitely respect.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Kindness and respect. Boundaries are keeping us all safe and keeping us feeling comfortable and acknowledging that we're all different, right? And so we have to respect each other. And saying no if someone's making you uncomfortable is totally okay. And it's important to respect when you hear a no too.
Yeah. And Augie learns, like our character Augie in the book. Have you two both read Wonder?
I have not.
Have you seen the movie?
No, which I have not.
Yeah. You've seen the movie?
It's been a while, but yes.
They actually did a great job. The movie is a lot like the book. There's definitely some differences, but basically Augie is a little boy. He has a facial difference. And one of the boundaries that Augie has to learn is like an emotional boundary and a physical boundary throughout the book. And so like when Augie's in school, our SLP participants were like, you've seen Augie already go back. He's transitioned out of homeschool and he's now in 5th grade. And one of the things that he's had to learn and adapt to is like people look at his face, and they, like, this one kid in the book asks him like a really rude question, and it's really blunt. And so what I mean by that is like, it's just really like inappropriate how he asks it. And later on in the book, one of the characters who becomes one of Augie's really good friends, he's like, hey, like, did you actually like that question? And Augie says no. And it's just a great example from our reading and from our book, of watching Augie go through, establishing healthy boundaries, and that, like you just said, the reason I thought of this, Gabby, was because you just said, like, we are all different, and we're going to look different and act different and feel different. And that's very much a part of Augie's everyday life. And so it's super important for him to say, hey, I don't like when you ask that question about my ears or my face or my nose. But one thing that I do love about Augie is that he actually learns, one of his healthy boundaries is like talking about his differences. Like that actually makes Augie feel safe, and that's can be different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I like that point, Alexandra, and I feel like you've kind of brought that up, is just it's important for us to just think about our own boundaries, like on our own, to think, what are things that I like and what are things that I don't like, and what are things that make me feel respected and not respected. And those things can change too, or we cannot realize what they are until maybe something happens and then you're like, I didn't like that question. That didn't make me feel good. So in the future, I'm going to not be okay with that. That's not okay with me anymore. And so it's okay to change your boundaries too, but I think it's important that we check in with ourselves and think, hey, how do you feel about this? Was that okay? Or, or even with our own behavior. So did I cross someone's boundary? And so really checking in with our own selves and being like, am I respecting my boundaries and the people around me's boundaries?
Yeah. Well said. I couldn't end on a better note that, our things change. Things can change, and things that we were okay with can be a boundary later down that we revisit and rework through. So well said. Well said. Well, thank you both. I'm so grateful that you both came to join us. Like I said earlier, we've been doing a lot of physical health and wellness, and so I'm excited to start talking about emotional wellness. Thank you both for being a part of that. It was so nice to meet you, Courtney. Welcome. I hope you can work with SLP many, many, many times to come.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your summer, SLP.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Big thanks to Gabby and Courtney for joining us today to talk about healthy relationships. I hope you all enjoy listening to what they have to share.
please, I encourage all of you to have these conversations at home and at school and set healthy boundaries. I wish you all a wonderful day, and we will see you later this week. Bye, SLP.